Hi everyone, welcome to the InfoBurst webinar series. My name is Anna Laura and I'll be your host for today. With me I have Jeremy Champ with Infosol who will be presenting on InfoBurst administration best practices. Again, we do like to keep these webinars interactive, so if you have any questions at all throughout the webinar, please feel free to enter them in the questions panel and I will direct those questions to Jeremy. So now I will hand it over to Jeremy. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Anna Laura, and welcome to everybody. This is InfoBurst Administration Best Practices. Like she said, I'm Jeremy. I am part of the InfoBurst support team, and I also do most of the training for InfoBurst. So I'll be taking you through this. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So first and foremost, we want to talk about the application server, where you're going to install InfoBurst. We do recommend that InfoBurst be installed on a dedicated server or virtual machine. InfoBurst has a relatively small footprint, as you can see by those recommended server specifications there. That said, depending on your use, we might recommend a little bit more RAM or disk space, actually, depending on how much you're using it. That can vary quite a bit. So if you have questions about that, please ask us. InfoBurst can be installed alongside other applications and reporting platforms, but you will want to consider those resources on that system, right? So if you have BO on there as well, that's going to take decidedly a lot more resources than just InfoBurst by itself. So keep that in mind. And also, that last note there, if you do install InfoBurst alongside BO on the same server, SAP does not support that. So you'll want to be very, very careful about that if that's what you plan to do. They tend to like having BO on its own server as well. It just keeps everything separated and easier to keep in mind. So just keep that in mind if you're going to be doing that. We do require a dedicated SQL or Oracle database to be used as the repository. SQLite can be used as a repository, but only for testing. We haven't found a way to get that to work sufficiently for full-on production environments. It's not as stable as we'd like. So, but for testing, it's great. It's wonderful. So go ahead and use that if you're going to be doing some testing. Just to be clear, you cannot share the repository with other applications. That will cause problems, so don't do it, please. The size of the repository can vary based on usage, so ensure you allow for the database to grow automatically, okay? So don't limit it to a certain amount because it can grow quite a bit. The repository holds the information for the logging in InfoBurst, which tends to be one of the major reasons it takes up a lot of space. So you can mitigate this ability, or mitigate this a little bit by setting the log retention period in IB shell. If you need help doing this, please reach out via the help desk. We'll be more than willing to help you set that up and take a look at your system and what you might need. So you can set those log retentions to 30 days, 90 days, whatever you think you're going to need, but it does have major implications on the size of your repository. So that last little note there is about having that database server locally, so on that same server. That does help with, mitigate some of the communication errors we see and things like that. We do it a lot here internally for our testing, so it does work just fine. Again, you want to keep in mind the implications for those server resources, right? So just keep that in mind if you're going to do that. Moving on, we've got backing up and maintenance. We recommend that you perform regular backups of both the repository and the application root folder, okay? It's very important to do both. If your environment changes frequently, weekly or even nightly backups can be a good idea. And having these backups will help you recover should something go wrong, right? So be sure you're doing those regularly. It has been invaluable in making sure that people are able to get back up and running when something goes wrong. So be sure you're doing that. If you're running InfoBurst from a VM, taking regular images makes server restoration pretty simple. It also ensures both the root folder and server dependencies such as ODBC connections and file mappings are maintained. Imaging, however, will not back up the repository unless the database server and repository reside on the same server. So keep that in mind. So if you have the database on a different server, you're still going to have to separately back up that repository on that other server. So keep that in mind. You'll want to back up that repository in conjunction with making the server image. For the imaging, go ahead and consult your Windows or server administrator, and they'll be able to do that for you. Finally, we recommend a scheduled weekly restart of the InfoBurst service to help ensure stability. This can be automated in various ways. So if you don't want to go in there and do that every week, you can automate that in various ways. You can talk to your server administrator for the best way to go about it. It can be done with batch files and things like that. So if you do want to do that, we can give some suggestions, but your server administrator is probably the best way to go about that. All right, one of my favorite ones, InfoBurst updates. We release updates for InfoBurst roughly every 4 months. Occasionally, we release patches for the most current build in the form of service packs. We always recommend that you update your InfoBurst implementation to the newest build possible. This ensures that you have all fixes and features that we have implemented. Also, we don't release patches for builds older than the current version, so if you find a bug, an update's going to be required to get that fixed anyway. So the later you are on there, the less headache that's going to be. We post all release notes on the announcements forum of the help desk. You can opt in to receive notifications for that, and we do recommend that you do that so you get all those releases and things like that in your inbox. Just as an FYI, we only use that forum for important information, so you won't be spammed with a bunch of nonsense. So it is only for major announcements and build releases and things like that. So we do recommend that you opt into that. And finally, though it is common practice, we feel it's important to point out that it is imperative to thoroughly test any updates prior to production implementation. And that's not just advice for InfoBurst. Anything that you update, you should probably test pretty thoroughly. So please do that. It makes things a lot easier on everybody. So, all right. So every InfoBurst license includes a free test or development server. We can't stress enough that you should take advantage of this. Use the dev server to validate new builds of InfoBurst and the connections to updated reporting platforms. So any platform that you update, so say if you go from BI 4.1 to BI 4.2, you want to be able to validate that, and you're going to want a test server to do that, right? You don't want to do that directly in production. With most updates, you'll want to test your critical bursts and XDCs at the very least. If you don't have exact copies on your test server, ensure that you have some that approximate what these critical ones are trying to do. With more involved updates, we'll recommend taking a copy of the production repository and using that for testing. This will allow you to test the exact bursts and XDCs that are in your production system, okay? There are steps to take to prevent duplicate work, which you can find on the help desk by searching for repository management. You can see that down there at the bottom. We also offer a service to help plan and guide this process. Contact your InfoSol account manager if you would like to get information on that. And it is a very helpful service that we offer. We try to mitigate any problems that you'll come into by doing those upgrades. So take advantage of that if you can. So all of our customers are entitled to a single disaster recovery license for each of your production InfoBurst licenses. Just as an FYI, our DR model is passive, which means that manual steps are required for recovery. First, you'll need a dedicated server for the DR. Ensure this server has the same dependencies as a production server. You'll have to install InfoBurst on there, and it must be the same version as production. So you are going to have to keep that updated along with your production server. Little bit of a manual process, but that will ensure that it's easier to jump over once that happens. So if in the event that anything happens. So once you install that, you can obtain a license for the DR server and store it somewhere logical. We recommend, the application root folder on the server itself. That way you never lose it. You just boot it up and you can install it immediately. And then on that DR server, you're just going to go ahead and stop and disable that InfoBurst service. And then once you'll activate that server in the event of a production server failure. So this new server will connect directly to your production repository upon activation. You start the service, you delete the current license, you install the license for the DR server, and then you restart the service and begin working. The service restart and the license update can be scripted. Reach out to the support team if you would like information on this. We do have some scripting options you can do. So if you want information on that, please reach out to us. All right, queues, this is a big one. We've been going over this with some customers recently quite a bit. There are two major queue levels in InfoBurst to control throughput. One of them is the burst queues, and the other is the platform or document queues, okay? The burst queue controls the number of bursts that can run simultaneously. You can configure this via the max bursts config option in either IBconfig or the IB shell. It was added to IBconfig, so that's a little bit easier than IB shell, but either way is fine. Since the more granular and impactful queue is at the platform level, we recommend simply setting the burst queue to the maximum of 999. That's not going to affect your throughput hardly at all. Basically, the throughput is controlled mostly at the document and platform level, so keep that in mind. So when you do this, it will allow you to control the throughput at the platform and document level. With it makes more sense, being that the lion's share of the processing is done on the reporting platform's server, so business objects. There are processing queues for individual document types on each platform. For example, if you have an XI31 platform and a BI42 platform, they will each have processing queues for Webby and Crystal, etc. Okay? And these are individual queues for each document type. So these platform queues govern the number of concurrent document refreshes per document type that InfoBurst will submit to a platform. So if you have 7 Webby queue and a 4 Crystal queue, you can run a total of 11 reports, assuming they are 7 Webby and 4 Crystal at the same time, okay? These can be adjusted also using modified queue in command shell. So if you, the shell, I'm going to reference a little bit in here because it is an administrative function. If you have questions on that, please reach out to us. It is basically a command prompt level tool. And you can do almost anything in there, pretty much everything actually, that you could do in the UI, you can do through the shell with commands. So, and that goes back to the scripting I mentioned before. It is all through the shell. So keep that in mind. And you can find more information on these platform queues in the knowledge base by searching platform queues, just to get an idea of what there are out there. You will notice if you search that there are catalog queues and processing queues, okay? So the catalog queues is when you catalog a document in InfoBurst, it pulls through all the relevant metadata. And so those queues are a little bit lower than the regular queues because it's not active processing, okay? So just keep that in mind. We have added recently in the last year or so, year and a half, a priority queue. And it is for important schedules that must run at a specific time. So one of the important things here is this queue bypasses any platform document queues you have set and can have an impact, a major impact on your BO server resources, okay? The default queue length is 5, but is configurable through the shell again. Please take a look at the recommendations for priority queue in the system configuration article of the knowledge base. I'll pull that up in a second. And you'll want to have a conversation about the processing capabilities of your BO server with your BO admin prior to making use of the priority queue, okay? Because it will override any document queues, so it will throw work at there that maybe your system can't handle, okay? So just be sure you have a conversation with your BO admin prior to using this queue. But essentially, if you go into the help desk, this is our help desk here, pretty simple. But if you type in system configuration, if I spell it right, that'd be great. All right, there we go. And you go down here and it'll have a priority queue article. There is a big recommendation section here, and I would encourage you to go there and look at that, read it, understand it, and if you have any questions, please reach out to us. All right, business object scaling. When scaling your business object system, especially with InfoBurst in the mix, you'll want to consider the impact a batch tool like InfoBurst will have before simply sending through as much work as possible. Your BO server should be able to meet the demand of your users as well as InfoBurst, and you'll want to consider this during your scaling, okay? It's highly recommended that some job slots in BO be reserved for InfoBurst alone, okay? Just so when InfoBurst is running, those can go through and be working just fine, and you can still have people going into Launchpad and running reports and things there like they need to on a daily basis, right? And as we talked about just a few seconds ago, make use of the platform queues to control that throughput, okay? And InfoSol can assist in scaling and optimization of your BO environment. You'll want to contact your account manager for information on that. We do have consultants that can come in and take a look at that and see what we can do for you. All right, timeouts. InfoBurst has some timeouts you can use to prevent what we call, quote, runaway business objects processes. The first is a request timeout at the platform level, and if you see there on that little picture, that is a platform connection in InfoBurst, and it's right there at the request timeout. The default is 10 minutes, okay? This will govern the total wait time for each individual web service request, for example, open, refresh, or publish. So any single refresh, if it takes, or any single request, if it takes longer than 10 minutes, it's going to go ahead and time out on that request timeout, okay? Our recommendation is you configure this to accommodate your longest report refresh. So if your longest refresh is 40 minutes, set it to 41 or 42 minutes, right? Just to make sure you have that little extra time. You don't want to set it to too long of a time because then it will wait a lot longer to time out if there's a major issue, and those might just sit there for a while. So you'll want to be very careful about not overdoing this or underdoing this. And the other one is in the document options of your bursts, we have the max generation timeout, okay? This will control the total runtime of an individual document in a burst from open to close, okay? So keep in mind that from open to close, you will have an open request, might have hundreds of refresh requests, you might have hundreds of set parameter requests, things like that. So from open to close, so that can be quite a long time, right? So that's why our default on that is 120 minutes. But you can change that for each document in each burst, okay? So if you have one is only going to take 10 minutes, you might want to set that down to 15 minutes, right? So that if it runs past that 15-minute mark, you know that there's a problem that you might need to look at.
Jeremy, we had a question come in if you have a second.
Yeah.
The question asks, for InfoBurst repository backups, are we taking a weekly/daily backup of the repo data in the same DB server, or should it be backed up to a different DB server? And what's the best option to restore the backups?
honestly, whether it's on a different server or the same server, it doesn't really matter. Most people just do the same server, just so it's for ease of, hey, just restore this over the old one and reconnect to it, and you're fine. You're good to go. But if you do it to a different server, you are going to have to do a switch repo on the server and connect to it to put in those the new server address and all that stuff. So it's a little bit more work that way, but it does provide the same service. Now, the easiest way to restore is simply to just restore over the old repository and just start up your InfoBurst service again. It should connect automatically. Does that answer? I hope that answers the question.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. All right, where were we? All right, this Max generation has a default of 2 retries, okay? So what'll happen is if there's a document that's taken too long and it hits that 120 minutes, it'll start over and retry again. If it hits that 120 minutes, it'll retry again, and then on the 3rd time, it'll just abort the entire burst, okay? And we do that to, there's sometimes BO has some issues and it won't respond in a timely manner, but the next time you run it, it'll be fine. So we have set that as a 2 retries just to try to mitigate some of those failures that could be prevented by just a retry, right? So, but keep in mind also that if you set the retries to like 5 and it's set to max gen of 120 minutes, it could run for 10 hours before it fails. So keep that in mind as well, right? The number of retries can be configured in IBconfig, like it says there, the RTS retry max in IBconfig. IBconfig is another tool that you can use via command line to change different settings in InfoBurst. Not everything is available but there's a lot. If you have questions about that, just reach out to us in support and we can help you out. Just as an FYI, this max generation does not apply to deliver phase of the burst. Okay, so if something happens with the delivery, the timeout will not abort the burst, okay? So if the SMTP server just isn't responding and the deliveries are just taking an hour, it's not going to, max generation will not kick in, okay? Because it's from open to close of the document. The delivery has nothing to do with that, okay? So keep in mind, this isn't a catch-all, all right? Our recommendations down there at the bottom are pretty self-explanatory. Each document is going to take a different amount of time, so you'll want to ensure the setting isn't too long or too short, as I've alluded to a little bit ago. The second recommendation is to burst from running for hours if they don't need to, okay? So if you have chronic business objects failures, we're going to want to keep this max generation pretty low. That way, it's not running for hours and hours and hours, right? You can go in there and make adjustments, reboot your WebEproc server or whatever it takes to fix that and then rerun that, okay? All right, users. InfoBurst offers a few different ways of managing users. The default one is having the InfoBurst administrator manage them manually. So just going in there and as the InfoBurst administrator, you go in there and you set people's access levels, you set people's roles, all that stuff, okay? So that one can be a little bit time consuming depending on the number of users you have in InfoBurst, right? You can also use Active Directory groups with InfoBurst. It does require you to be using Windows authentication, okay? So it will be like a single sign-on type of situation. And you can set the role for all users in the group at the AD group level, okay? So it'll automatically create a group for them, and you can set the role for that group automatically. Another alternative is using an authentication data source, okay? This allows you to use a tabular data source such as Excel or a database query to manage the users. The source must contain a column for user, password, and role. Beyond that, there are several optional columns you can use to customize the users, such as groups and things like that. You can set all that with the data source. And if you notice down there, the knowledge base article with authentication management will run you through all that. And this particular one is ideal for managing users of the InfoBurst portal. It's just a lot easier to do that than to try to do them manually. So, and I would encourage you to take a look at what we've got on the knowledge base for that. It does go into a little bit more detail. And if you have questions beyond that, go ahead and reach out to us, and we'll help you out. All right, staging major updates and changes. All right, many customers find that they need to make major changes to their environments, and these are understandable, right? Sometimes you will need to upgrade the InfoBurst server or the BO server, or both even. Most times, though, it's a less dramatic change like a version upgrade or moving a database repository, okay? We recommend a structured plan for these changes to ensure a minimum of downtime and production issues, okay? On the help desk, you'll find recommendations and instructions on these major changes under the search items listed there. So moving an application server, moving a repository, upgrading business objects version, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all on there, and we have extensive articles explaining what you need to do in those situations. I do encourage you to look at those. I don't want to read through every single one of those on here, but know that we do have information out there for all these major changes. And when you have a chance, please take a look. If you have questions, again, reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. For pretty much all of these, in fact, all of these, we do offer services to help plan, stage, test, and implement these changes, right? Ask your InfoSol account manager if you'd like information on this, okay? We do offer help with these. So if you're making a major change and you're not sure how to go about it, please reach out. We're more than happy to help you, okay? All right, we're gonna jump into reporting here. For a long time, customers have been asking for more reporting options beyond what was already available in InfoBurst. Not too long ago, OData reporting was added to allow for accessing information from the repository itself, okay? OData allows one to use an OData version 4 compliant reporting tool to pull this data from the repository. Most often, this is something like Excel, okay? But it has to be version 4 compliant, okay? So keep that in mind. That is very important. You can access objects, runtime logs, user audit information, all sorts of stuff in there. And there are quite a few functions that we've added. So if you look down there at the bottom of this picture here, audit by action, bursts aborted this month, et cetera, et cetera. We've added, I don't know, probably 24 of those or something. Just various ones that people have asked over the years, well, over the about year and a half now, to make it easier for them to pull those specific things. My biggest recommendation here is to search OData on the help desk and watch the video tutorial. Brian does an amazing job of taking you through everything you need to know about how to set up and pull the information from OData. It's a really, really cool series. We have that on there, and so I would encourage you to go watch that. I think it's not too long of a video, but it does take you through all that cool stuff on there, and it's very, very cool, very informative. Also, you can find information on all the reporting available in InfoBurst on the help desk under system reporting. And let's go take a look at that really fast just so you can see kind of what we have. So if you type in these phrases that I put on here, it'll almost always pull up the exact article I'm talking about. And if you'll notice here, OData is right here, and you actually have a link to that tutorial right here. Okay, and then we have all this other stuff, the schedules report. We're going to talk about this universe in just a second. And then we actually have XDCs that you can pull information from as well. So I would encourage you to go take a look at this and see what you find. And if you have any questions, again, reach out to us. We're more than happy to talk you through it. So we do actually have a little bit of reporting on the repository as well. This kind of gives you a basic overview of the different tables in the repository and what kind of information you can get in there. Anna Laura, are we going to send this out afterwards?
The recording and the slides, yes.
Okay, awesome. Cool. So you'll get a copy of this, so you can kind of take a look at this particular slide and see what the OBJ table is, basic object metadata, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that'll kind of help you be able to query that if you'd like, okay? So we have also this business objects universe, and on that system reporting page, you can put this universe over into BO and run some limited reports based on that universe, okay? So it'll pull information from your repository, okay? So it has burst and XDC runtime and burst deliveries, okay? And the way to find that universe is right at the bottom here. You can just download it from this article. All right. Do we have any other questions yet, Anna Laura?
No other questions at this time.
Okay, I was expecting more questions. We're coming towards the end here. So, all right. So this is one of the really cool things that we offer, right? We have an InfoBurst health check where we do a very, very thorough analysis of your InfoBurst environment. We give you recommendations for optimization and user education, which is my thing. We also do reporting of your repository, runtime issues, anything where your objects and users are having any issues, or if they are, and we go through your help desk status and history. So we go through all those tickets, try to analyze what kinds of issues you've been seeing, and give suggestions based on all of this information, right? So it's a very, very cool service that we offer, and it can be helpful for optimizing your system. We do highly recommend getting one of these done if you have a medium or large implementation, or even a small one if you are looking for ways to make it more efficient. So you can contact us at helpdesk@infosol.com for details, or you can reach out to your account manager, and they should have some information on that as well. But this is a very, very useful tool, and I'm hoping that some of you will at least look into it, because it's a very useful thing. And here's the bread and butter for me, reporting issues to support. So basically that last bullet point is the most important here. The more detail you provide, the quicker we're going to be able to help you with it, right? So if you have a burst or XDC issue, give us that support package. It contains pretty much most of the information we're going to need, right? It's going to give us the information on your system. It's going to give us the summary based, how did you build that burst or that XDC? It's going to give us those server logs so we can go in and look at your daily, what's happening in your server, so that we can see if there's any pattern going on. And it's going to give us those activity logs, which will show us what happened on the last few executions of that burst or XDC. So it's very, very, very informative, and helps us help you, basically. I don't like that phrase, but it does help us to get to the bottom of your issue and get you moving again. For general system issues, we will ask you for the system support package. So the support package for a burst or XDC is very specific to that burst or XDC. The system support package actually gives us information, more higher level information on the system itself. So we're going to get your server logs and your service logs and things like that we can look through at a high level and try to find out what's going on in general with your system. But what we do want you to try to do with each ticket is to say, hey, you know, we made this change to the system and then this started happening, or, you know, this has been running for 10 years and then all of a sudden this happened, you know. Tell us all the information you can, because the more information we have, the better we are able to say, okay, this might be the problem, and help you get up and running again. I do this same type of slide in every single training class I do as well. So it's very, very important. Yeah, I think that's the end of this particular one. It went really fast because we didn't have a lot of questions. Are
We
there any
did have
questions hanging out there?
Yeah, we did have one just come in. They asked, what is the status of moving away from Flash?
That's a good question. We are currently working on the new UI. We will have it done by end of life of Flash, which is the end of next year, I believe. The newest versions of InfoBurst, so 237 and 238, do have some limited usage of the new UI available in them with some of the reporting and things like that. So if you want to be able to use that, you can search it on the help desk or just reach out to us and we can help you get in there and use that to at least get an idea of what's coming.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Nope, that looks like that was the last one. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to enter them in the questions panel for Jeremy.
We can hang out for a few minutes and
Yeah,
make sure everybody...
I'll do just a few announcements and then I'll check back afterwards, give people some time to enter their questions if needed. So let me see. All right. So I did want to let everyone know that we do have a few user groups going on in New Jersey, Southeast Michigan, Grand Rapids, Indiana, and Pittsburgh. These are free educational meetings that you can join. And we do have a few that Pascal Gallin from SAP France will be there talking about the new BI 4.3. So that will be really exciting. If you do want to join us at any of these user groups, please head over to events.infosol.com/user groups to sign up. And then the next one, I did want to talk about IBIS a little bit. It is coming up. The main conference will run June 22nd through the 24th at the Park Hyatt Aviara in Carlsbad, California. We also offer pre-conference and post-conference offerings on June 21st and June 25th through the 26th. Registration is now open, and we are also have the call for papers open. So if you wanted to talk about your InfoBurst story, how your company uses InfoBurst, please submit a call for papers. If we do accept your call for papers, you will receive an awesome discount to attend the IBIS main conference. If you want more information on the call for papers, you can also head over to attendibis.com. You will see it on the main menu bar, or you can do attendibis.com/call for papers. That's all the announcements I have for now. I didn't see any other questions come in, Jeremy, so I think we can go ahead and end the webinar now.
Cool. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jeremy.
No problem.